be sort of under the not successful?
You could say it was a success in that they put it on the table, but ultimately it ended up not being as successful as they hoped because it didn't eliminate alcohol use. I don't know, there's different studies on that. Some say it did, some say it didn't at all. It certainly didn't end that discussion, and in the end it was looked at as a really negative thing and repealed. I was going to ask you a really stupid question. I was going to be like, did any of you watch that documentary? I don't know why you would. There was you know who Ken Burns is? He's a famous historical documentarian. He did like the Civil War and baseball and one on jazz. He did a 3-part one on Prohibition that I was like, how interesting is this going to be? Oh, it was fantastic. It's really interesting. It might help you a little for this class, but it's one of those things that I saved on my DVR not to erase. That's how excited I was. That's only reserved for certain things, like stealing Lincoln's body and stuff like that. All right, can we answer number 10? Yes.
For the social part, where we put examples, could we put, for the worker thing, what you said was, could we put the close rate?
Yeah. Yes. And if you really want to write something advanced, I know none of you do, but if you did, you could talk about Theodore Roosevelt when he ran for president in 1912. He was talking about a very advanced social agenda. His new nationalism was like right to vote for women, some type of health insurance, cutting the hours of labor. I mean, he was pretty progressive in 1912. I don't know that he was more progressive than Wilson, but one of the successes was before 1920, it completely changed the American idea of what government should and shouldn't do. So much so that by 1908, all 3 candidates running for president were claiming to be progressive. William Howard Taft, William Jennings Bryan, and Eugene Debs. And in 1912, all 4 of them were progressives: Eugene Debs, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. Thank you. All right, number 10, evaluate the progressivism of Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson. Which issues were some more progressive than the others? We've sort of been circling this question all along. So one of the assignments I used to give, man, they hated it. And I could give it to you since you said you wanted more assignments, remember?
No.
Who said that?
Our period.
Gerald did in his summary.
I said it helped.
See?
I didn't say we could have just like.
And Aide, she wanted homework too.
Homework.
So the homework assignment was, it was a report card for all 3 presidents, and what they had to do was go into the text and find examples of their progressivism in different areas, and then they gave them like a grade in every other area and then an overall grade. It was designed to kind of help them write an essay question like this. So I had them look at very specific areas like railroad regulation and a lot of very specific detail that you wouldn't need to know. But approaching this question, you'd do it the same way. You could take categories and say, who was more progressive on this issue? So if you had like consumer affairs, definitely Theodore Roosevelt was very progressive on that, as was Woodrow Wilson. The problem with this question is it's hard to come up with a lot of specifics. In fact, even discussing it with you, I won't have some specifics off the top of my head for some of them, and you'd have to kind of study and look at some specifics about what they did. But if you think about each category, the trust one's easy because we know that William Howard Taft broke up more trust than Roosevelt did. He didn't differentiate as much between good trust and bad trust. And then Woodrow Wilson just went to town on trust and broke them all up. So that one's an easy one to discuss. You could discuss their commitment to African American civil rights, but it's like William Howard Taft was pretty silent on the issue. Theodore Roosevelt didn't really do that much, except that he seemed open to the inclusion of African Americans. Maybe not what W.B. Du Bois was offering, yes, every time, but what Booker T. Washington was. And Wilson had no interest in advancement of African American civil rights. So you just have to think of different areas. Conservation, Roosevelt wins. Regulation of the economy, Wilson wins that. Give me another category.
Social.
Well, I think Wilson wins that, except unless you're black or female. And then Roosevelt, it's kind of hard to grade Taft because he didn't do a lot. He really was not that progressive on a lot of issues. He didn't really want to be president. He just wanted to be a Supreme Court justice.
Wait, how is Wilson more socially progressive than Roosevelt?
Because he was far more for the advancement of the working man and labor conditions and against big business. If you get that correlation, like he's far more in favor of a more egalitarian society. I don't know that Roosevelt isn't. Taft, just didn't really think about it much. It's not a very good question to ask you, huh?
Does that mean we stop?
I didn't say that.